ESPN college football analyst Chris Lowe now inside the game. Chris, I hope you're doing well. Welcome into the game.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm doing great, Brian.
Chris, are you making your way back home, or are you going to stay the night in T-Town?
I'll head back tomorrow. Tomorrow, probably.
Absolutely. You had a chance to visit with Nick Saban earlier. What was the takeaway?
Well, with Nick, it's always about that team. And he's never in the business of comparing. And I always joke, he's a guy that has no rearview mirrors in his life and in anything he does. And so it's this team and how this is going to be different. A lot of new faces, and yet for all the hubbub, Brian, over recruiting classes, and nobody's recruited better than Alabama the last few years, I'm not so sure the biggest recruits they got were guys like O.J. Howard, Reuben Foster, Tim Williams, Jonathan Allen, to come back to school for their senior year. I mean, you're talking about guys that all would have probably been, depending on who you talk to, late first round to fourth round pick, third round pick, but they're all coming back. So to have that type of experience, guys who've been on big stages, played, guys that can be leaders for you, that's a key. And I think that's something probably that as you look at this team and we sort of forecast what type of team they'll be this year, I know that it certainly didn't go or hasn't gone unnoticed by Coach Saban to have that type of senior or veteran leadership returning.
You put out a tweet earlier about Cooper Bateman would probably be Alabama's starting quarterback if they play today, but the race is far from over. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah. I asked. We were just talking about the quarterbacks, and I heard your clip as you were bringing me in, and he just said there were too many. Nick said there were too many days where guys would maybe make a few good plays, but then make bad plays. And right now, I think because of his experience and knowledge, Nick said that Cooper Bateman would be probably their quarterback if they started right now. But he also pointed out that this time a year ago, as he exited spring, he thought probably David Cornwell would be the guy, and he wasn't. Jake Coker won the job. So I guess the moral of the story is whoever maybe is in the lead or has played the best in the spring isn't necessarily going to be the quarterback. I think right now, again, because of his experience and knowledge of the offense, and he has played a little bit, Nick said Cooper would be the guy. I tell you, he's very impressed with the freshman, Jalen Hurts, the way he's moved around, made big plays, probably made fewer mistakes than anybody would have thought a freshman would make, a true freshman coming in, and I don't think he has tried to do too much. I think he's just continued to try to learn the offense, progress, and I think what Nick's quote to me was about him was he's been good enough to at least be in the conversation to be the guy. Now, I don't know that it's realistic that a true freshman would be there, but he's at least given him something to think about. I don't know that Barnett's had a great spring, but I don't think you count him out of the equation. Same for Cornwell. We'll sort of see how all that shakes out. So, again, at the end of the day, I think that Bateman is probably the leader in the clubhouse, but as we've seen, that can change. The great thing about Alabama, though, and their program is, and I don't mean this as a slight to Jake Coker or Blake Simpson, but they haven't been elite at quarterback the last 2 years, and they won championships of some kind. They won the national title last year, won the SEC title 2 years ago. So when you recruit as well as they have around the quarterback, and you've got as many playmakers, and you've got as much depth as they almost invariably do on defense, I don't know that at Alabama and the way Nick Saban likes to play football, that you have to have your quarterback be elite and win games for you. And that's certainly proven to be the case the last 2 years.
Going back to Blake Barnett, and I know it was media, I know it was the players that we spoke to, a lot of positive coming out of Blake Barnett. What do you think has happened in these 12 practices that has made even Nick Saban, he mentioned all three quarterbacks, but failed to mention Blake Barnett on Saturday. What has happened on that Blake Barnett front?
Well, I don't, certainly I haven't been to practices, so I don't want to talk in detail because I don't know, but I can tell you in talking to Nick today that it's a lot, probably what a lot of them are facing. Ryan, is it trying to make too much happen too often, hit a home run. You're swinging for the fences every play instead of just doing what you need to do. Sometimes you just, especially Bama, you got, Jay Howard, Bo Scarborough to turn around and hand the ball off to. You got the receivers, coming back. I mean, sometimes you just sort of live to see the next play or the next series and make sure you don't throw it to the other team. I know there have been some interceptions, across the board that they're not real happy about. And I think, again, we've seen the last couple of years that, you don't have to have a guy that throws for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, to be in that championship mix with Alabama. So I think that's, to answer your question, I think that's probably has been Blake's biggest problem. Not that he's not talented, not that he hasn't, done some good things at times. Probably just trying to be a little too much, and probably that's that pressure. His second year in the program, the job is, pretty wide open right now. He sees it's wide open. Maybe putting too much on himself. Summer's a big time for quarterbacks and receivers. You get your continuity with the receivers, your chemistry. You throw a lot of 7-on-7s. So a lot can change between now and the second week of August. You certainly want to have your guy by then. I wouldn't write anybody out of the equation.
Chris, how do you guard against transfers? Because that just happens in college football. And if Cooper Bateman, if we're talking next Monday and Cooper Bateman is clearly the number one guy, you're probably going to have at least one transfer that'll leave here. How do you guard against that if you're Nick Saban?
Well, I don't think you can do anything about it. I think you just sort of the first thing is you want guys who are not afraid to compete, and that's set Alabama apart from just about everybody else. Is they get guys on not just offense, certainly defense too, who they know when they come in that there's going to be competition galore, and they're not afraid of it. They want it. They understand that they're going to be, 89% of the players that Bama gets, when they get them, think they got a chance to play in the NFL. They know if they're going to play in the NFL that it's going to be competition in its highest form. Why not experience it, measure yourself against the best in college, and I think that's what they do. So I don't think Saban or Lane Kiffin or any of the guys on the offensive staff worry about that. If the guy's made the right stuff, he wants to keep competing, and he believes in himself, he's going to hang around and compete. If not, he's going to go somewhere else, and there's nothing you can do. The good thing is whoever is the quarterback is this will probably be. I don't, I was going to say I don't know if there's an Amari Cooper or Julio Jones, but I tell you what, kid last year, the freshman last year was outstanding. So he's really good. But I think the depth, Brian, at the receiving core, and I would throw Howard in that. They got the kid coming in. The grad transfer, the transfer from Bowling Green, who was an exceptional player last year. The good thing is whoever's throwing the football is going to have a lot of guys, I think, that can go get the football, and that's always a nice luxury.
Would you think that so far the defense has really been electric? They're very, very fast. Any comments about that defensive side of the football and that transition to a new defensive coordinator?
Well, I don't think there's going to be a big transition, and today, discussing that with Nick is he's really never he's had the luxury of never really having to start from scratch on defense when he's hired a coordinator. Guys he's brought in or been his coordinator, going all the way back. Really, he said when he was at Michigan State, are guys that know his defense, that understand it, that know how to teach it, know what he wants. Jeremy's been in this defense. I mean, when he went to Florida State and then Georgia, he essentially took Alabama's defense and ran a variation of it. So I think that makes it a much easier transition, Ryan, and I think it does for players, it does for everybody. And at the end of the day, it's Nick Saban's defense. I mean, he knows what he wants his defense to look like, and that's, I think there's this misnomer that he's the guy that's really running it. And maybe he is, but the coordinator has to be able to implement it and implement it in games. But the beauty of it with Saban there is he can always step in and fix it. I mean, he knows it. He knows what he wants. He knows exactly what he wants. If it's going in a direction that he doesn't like, or they're doing things that maybe he feels like they need to be doing differently, he can step in and fix it. And you can't say that about every head coach. Certainly now with the most of your guys being hired are offensive guys. But you can't say that about every head coach defensively, but you certainly can about him. So I don't think there's going to be a huge transition. Yeah, they lost a lot of talent up front. When you lose an Ashawn and Jaron Reed, you lose your top corner, and Cyrus, Reggie Ragland. You got what? Probably 4 guys that are going to be first-round picks there. 3 or 4, Ashawn, Reggie Ragland, Jaron Reed. But I tell you what, you've got guys waiting in the wings that haven't been stars, or maybe they're not household names. Some of these guys are sophomores or juniors and younger that I think are going to step right in. I mean, Deron Payne, to me, is just going to be a force right in the middle of that defensive line. Reuben Foster, I think, is ready to break out and have a great year. Deshaun Hands had a little bit of a thing here recently. Nothing serious, a little injury in spring ball, but he's another one that I think the light's about to come on for, and he's going to be that guy that's just a beast for them. In the secondary, Ronnie Harris, just today and talking to people, everywhere you turn, you hear people talking about his ability, how big and physical and athletic he is. Mika Fitzpatrick, I don't think he's a new name. We saw him last year. He's been starting really since the day, or playing since the day he got on campus. So there's so many of those guys like that, Ryan. They're just ready. And then I think on top of it, as I said at the outset of our conversation, you bring back a Tim Williams. You bring back a Jonathan Allen. Ryan Anderson, another one that is outstanding. So they got plenty of players. And I think the fact that Jeremy's been in the system, he knows it. He's coached under Nick. I just don't think there's going to be a big transition.
You're a guy that knows Nick Saban very, very well. Obviously, you can walk into the office and have a great conversation with him. We're talking to Chris Lowe right now, ESPN college football analyst. We've picked up on a little different Nick Saban this year. It's a little more energy, a little more pep in the step. Did you notice that in Nick Saban today?
Listen, as long as I've known Nick, he's always been ready to go. I mean, he's never been a guy that he's not a sit around. Let's just sit here and shoot them. He's ready to go. I think Nick has realized even more so after last year, 2 years ago, when it didn't end the way they wanted to. He likes coaching football, man. That's that's his sanctuary. The practice field, certainly in the spring when so much is developing. You got new guys coming up through the system. You're teaching. I mean, he loves that. This is, even though Nick's, I guess he's 65. I bet he feels like he's about 30 out there, running around. He's got the cornerbacks or his guys. I mean, I don't know if there's more of a pep, but I think certainly this time of year, Ryan, there's always a pep in his step because he just likes coaching football. And I think that's the thing to remember about him. He's not going to coach forever, but as long as it stimulates him the way it does, as long as it is something that he gets up in the morning and can't wait to do, he's going to keep coaching. And Nick's much like Spurrier, he's a young 65. He's in great shape. He's constantly on the go. And I think people are going to start using it against him here. I think they probably already are a little bit. That he's only going to be here. I'm talking about the recruiting trail. He's only going to be here so many more years. But I tell you what, my dealings with him over the last year, and talks with him, and then sort of meeting with him today, I think he's as happy coaching football as he's been in a long time. And he also understands that the way they've got their recruiting operation set up there, and the way it's just sort of continuing to churn out good players, why would he go anywhere? Well, you know what else? What's he going to do? I kid him about that. What in the world would you do, Nick, if you weren't coaching football? And, of course, his response is always the same. I don't want to think about it.
Chris Lowe, final question. The expectations here in Tuscaloosa. He's created a monster where it's not about an SEC title. I remember hosting a funeral home here after winning the SEC title but losing to Ohio State in the college football playoffs. How do you reach those expectations? Does that ever get to him, you think, that it's not about winning the SEC West, it's not about winning the SEC title, it is championship or bust, and that is a unique era in college football that, a lot of programs have goals, but this one is realistic. You win a national title, it's success. If not, it's not.
Well, I think it irritates him. I mean, he's probably not going to come out and talk about that at length, but I think it irritates him. I know it irritates him. They won an SEC championship in 2014 and lost to the eventual national champion in the playoffs, Ohio State, a very good, deep, talented Ohio State team. And the narrative was, well, among fans and media, well, bad season for Alabama, the dynasty's over. They won an SEC championship, for Christ's sakes. I mean, and I think that irritates him, but no, he's not motivated by it. That's not his motivation. He's motivated by, again, the next game, the next practice, seeing the next guy come up through the ranks that can be a star, can be a really good football player. I think that's what motivates Nick Saban. But hey, those are expectations, to be fair, that he created. And he knows that. He'll be the first to tell you that. And Alabama fans are spoiled. Probably been spoiled for a long time. But I don't think Nick Saban, knowing the way I do, Ryan, would want to coach another place where the expectations aren't the way they are there at Tuscaloosa. That's the way he's wired. He expects to be at a high level all the time, but you can't keep up that year after year after year. There's going to, if Dick coaches 2 more years, 5 more years, chances are there's going to be a year where they lose 2-3 games and they're not in the championship mix. Then what happens? I think that'll be very interesting because they've won so much at such a high level that there's really almost I won't say a generation of fans, but there's probably a sect of fans there in Alabama that are about as out of touch with reality as you possibly can be.
Can they go back-to-back?
Sure, absolutely they can. And people say, well, they don't have a quarterback. I think they're going to be good on defense again. They've got great playmakers out the ball. Listen, Bo Scarborough is going to be a star. And we've seen great running backs at Alabama. There's no question in my mind that guy is going to be the next. So they've got everything it takes. They've got a great punter. Absolutely they can. Now, to predict it, I'm not going to predict it because I think the ball's got to bounce your way. And that's the thing that as we sit here and forecast media, all of us like to sit around and do this. The thing we probably never weigh as much as we should, Ryan, is the other variable. Does the ball bounce your way? And it's bounced Alabama's way. Nick and I were talking about that today, and he's the first to admit it. That the way college football is set up right now, you got to have some good breaks. You got to have some lucky breaks. You got to have teams that lose. Alabama's won a bunch of championships where they've lost early, and they've battled back, and the right teams have lost for them. They don't even play for the SEC championship last year. If Arkansas doesn't hit a 4th and 25 lateral. So things have got to bounce their way, but I certainly think they're good enough and they're well coached. They've got the right players. They got the depth to be right there in the mix. There's no question in my mind that they are that type